Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of The Secret Life of Private Tutors, which is basically where I just talk about my personal experiences as a private tutor. Maybe it'll be interesting to you, maybe it won't. I'm just going to put it out there anyway. So, for today's topic, I wanted to talk about a kind of comment that I get a lot from students. It usually goes something like this. You taught me more in an hour than my teacher did in the past 2 weeks. It's not always literally those words. Sometimes the comparison is made with a professor rather than a teacher, for example. Sometimes the student says they learned more in that short amount of time than they did in the past 4 weeks, or an entire semester, or even in some cases an entire year. Sometimes the student has or has had other tutors and compares me to them. Though the details differ from one student to another, the idea they're trying to convey is the same. They believe I can teach them more efficiently. And I like to think about where that belief comes from. As I've mentioned before, I have a bit of an obsession with figuring out how people's brains work. I find it very intriguing how people perceive the value of things. In this case, the value of time spent in the classroom versus time spent in one of my tutoring sessions. So, when I hear people claim that I've helped them learn something fast, I ask myself, is that how it really is? Or is that just how it appears to be? And if it only appears that way, then why? What's really going on? How much of that can really be attributed to me, and how much of that is really just external circumstances? It's hard to look at this from where I am since I'm on the inside, so to speak. It's hard for me to try to guess exactly what my work looks like to someone looking at it from the outside. Fortunately, I found a related phenomenon that I can use to get some sense of what's going on, and that would be all the educational tutorial videos out there that you can find on YouTube and I guess on the internet in general. Examples include ones that you're probably familiar with: Khan Academy, Professor Dave Explains, The Organic Chemistry Tutor, Step-by-Step Science, Flipping Physics, and a long list of others that I probably wouldn't be able to give you off the top of my head. Their videos will often have one or more comments saying something along the lines of, "You explained in 12 minutes what my teacher couldn't explain over the past 2 days." Sounding familiar? I've definitely benefited from these kinds of videos myself while I was in school. But I've never felt the inclination to say something like that. You know, to say that the video taught me something faster, so to speak. I've never once felt that way about any educational video I've watched, and it's not because they aren't helpful. It's more that I'm aware of what led to them being helpful in the first place. Usually, I'd go to those videos after having done my own thinking or after reading the relevant section in the textbook. If I was still getting stuck, then it was off to the internet, especially YouTube. Searching for the right video was often difficult, as the best search terms to use weren't always obvious. Even if they were, the title of the video wouldn't necessarily tell me right away if it had the specific thing I was looking for. For example, do you know how many videos there are about the topic of entropy, which gets brought up in physics, but more often people get exposed to it first in chemistry? It's so hard to find a video on entropy that doesn't call it disorder. And even when I do find a video that has "entropy is not disorder" in the title, and in all caps, by the way, I watch the entire video and it still doesn't explain any of the math behind it, which is what I'm looking for. So that was the situation, and of course I would try one video, then another, until I eventually found what I was looking for. And when I found it, things would start to click fast. But I still wouldn't say that the video taught me something quickly. Why? Because if I didn't have the, let's call it, pre-exposure to the ideas that the video covered, if I started with the video before ever having learned about the ideas in class, or reading about them in the textbook, or even just thinking about them on my own for that matter, then the video probably would have felt confusing. It would have taken longer to digest the information it was presenting. The video has the advantage of not having to dwell on the concepts for very long, because I've already been exposed to them. It might not even have anything new for me to learn, but instead presents ideas that were already in my head and just organizes them a little more. The video can also sometimes have the advantage of animations and other visuals that you can't get from the book or the classroom, though there is research to suggest that students might actually learn better when they don't have visual aids because it forces them to put in the work to picture the idea in their head. But now I'm getting off topic. Where was I again? Right, video advantages versus teachers and textbooks. So yeah, the main thing that stuck out to me is the fact that the person in the comments section comparing the video to their teacher is seeing it as quicker, quote unquote, at least partly because the teacher has already introduced the ideas, even if they did so poorly. So tying that back into our main topic, I think I've had that same advantage as a tutor. Unless it's a situation where I'm basically homeschooling the student and teaching everything from scratch, I have it easier when I can just skip the introductions and jump straight into examples and clarifications. I end up saving a lot of time, and so I unintentionally create the illusion that I teach fast. But then again, teaching is a skill. And like any skill, not everyone has it. And even for the people who do have it, they don't all perform at the same level. There are people who can do it better, easier, and yes, faster. So what do the faster educators do differently? Note that what I'm going to list here is what educators can do to cover material faster, which doesn't always mean better. So with that in mind, here are a couple of things they can do. One is that they, unfortunately if you ask me, can cut corners. I say unfortunately, not because I think you have to cover every little detail, but because the particular kind of corner cutting that I'm talking about here is the so-called quick fix, which sacrifices long-term learning and replaces it with a mindless shortcut that allows you to survive your next exam. I guess some people are happy with that, but I'm not, though that's probably a topic for another video. Moving on. Another thing that teachers can do is develop a deep understanding of the subjects they teach. With that deeper understanding, they're able to structure their lessons more efficiently by cutting out the things that actually need to be cut out, and also by including the things that don't appear to be necessary, but turn out to be very helpful in setting things up for a more vital topic later on. For example, all the times I go out of my way to actually explain the math when teaching chemistry, because chemists are not mathematicians, and I will never get tired of saying that. So, apart from cutting the right things out and adding in some more helpful topics, another key to efficient lesson structure, before adding or removing anything, is good topic ordering. I do this with both chemistry and physics, but especially physics. The order of the chapters in your typical textbook for either of those subjects is not something I tend to follow too closely. I don't go crazy with my adjustments, but there are some chapters here and there that I will move around a bit because a concept or two from a certain chapter might be easier to grasp if you took some of the concepts that are covered in a later chapter and covered them ahead of time. Okay, so that was another option. What else can be done? Remember the story of the tortoise and the hare? The concept of haste makes waste? All the times I've said and will continue to say that you shouldn't rush things and that accuracy comes before speed? Believe it or not, you actually can learn faster by going slower. Now, I'm not saying that you want to deliberately move at a snail's pace here, but what I am saying is that it's worth it to invest time trying to develop competence in a topic before moving on to the next one. For example, if my physics students are showing that their understanding of force is shaky, I don't move on to the topic of energy. Without understanding force, you can't do energy. You can't do circular motion, you can't do momentum, you certainly can't do torque and angular momentum, and you can forget about all of electricity and magnetism. Electricity and magnetism is almost a whole third of all of physics that you can't do without understanding force and energy. So, I slow down. Actually, I take it a step further. When the situation demands it, I ignore whatever the current topic in class happens to be, and I go backwards to an earlier chapter, or even an earlier course that the student probably shouldn't have passed in the first place. A lot of students magically disappear whenever I do that, but the ones who keep an open mind make good, meaningful progress and have the results to show for it. There is value in slowing down and retracing your steps, and there's less than zero value in forcing yourself to go forward while leaving behind an unfinished job. Ever wonder why so many of the straight A students report high stress levels? At least part of it comes from the feeling of being on a sort of treadmill that won't stop and having to constantly force oneself to keep up. Learning is supposed to have some degree of challenge and rigor to it, but frying your brain with the quantity over quality approach won't help you learn anything in the end. It's far better to spend an hour mastering one concept that stays with you for years than to spend 6 hours shoving 100 concepts into your head only to forget all of it in 3 months. I have more to say on this, but maybe in another video so we don't get too off topic. I have one more quote-unquote fast teaching strategy to discuss, and that is leveraging the Tutors advantage that I mentioned earlier in this video. The advantage of not having to necessarily reteach everything and being able to just focus on students' questions. Actually, the focus on questions doesn't have to be exclusively a tutor's advantage per se. Even the classroom teacher can make use of this one. How so? They just have to focus on the frequently asked questions. Though it does take time to see the results, it's a very simple process. You first learn these key questions by paying attention to the questions you had back when you were a student. When you start teaching and over time, as you take questions from one student after another, you develop a sort of mental database of all the common points of confusion. Then you can start preemptively answering those questions, learning how to seamlessly integrate them into your lessons over time. There is no perfect lesson, but if there was, this would be the system for creating it. Step 1, present lesson. Step 2, take questions. Step 3, think of ways to answer said questions. Step 4, find better ways to answer said questions. Step 5, adjust your lessons accordingly. Step 6, repeat the above. I don't think there's a need for me to explain why this works for the teacher, but nevertheless, I can attest to the fact that it works because, as I've mentioned in previous videos and will surely mention again in the future, I often get tutoring requests that are basically homeschooling situations. In those cases, I'm not just the homework helper. I'm put in the position of the teacher, and I'm the one assigning the homework. So yes, I can say with confidence that the 6-step cycle I just brought up actually works. And with that, I think that's everything I wanted to say here. I just don't want people to develop the idea that any particular educator is some sort of magician that just quickly makes things click. There's always a lot more going on behind the scenes, and it helps to be aware of it, because when you break out of that illusion, when you can see it for what it is, well, then you can stop waiting for some sort of hero to come in and save you, and start taking matters into your own hands. Independent learning is what I preach, but learners aren't going to become independent if they think there are these magical solutions that just quickly fix everything for them. If you think you learned something quickly, try looking at it again. Do you know it as well as you think you do? Would you be able to explain it to someone else if you had to? If not, then you've still got some work to do. This has been Al the Tutor, reminding you once again that ignorance is not bliss. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.